everyone, welcome back to another week on the Brush by Brandy YouTube channel. This week we are going to be working on this piece that's behind me, and we're going to have a little bit of fun this week because I'm actually on vacation, which means I'm staying at an Airbnb that's not my usual workspace at all. So I had access to none of my usual tools and things that I like to use on every furniture piece. So I'm going to make a trip to my local hardware store, and we're going to refinish a piece using just stuff that I find at the local hardware store, and sometimes even improvising a little bit for things I didn't have. So all I brought with me on this trip was a little bit of my paint and some of my brushes, and the rest I found locally. So you guys stick around and we're going to make this really cool look and make it happen on sometimes not everything that we needed. So stick around and let's go ahead and get started. So this week I'm going to be refinishing a furniture piece from my Airbnb. I'm actually traveling, and so everything I do is going to be away from my workspace and using what I could get at your average hardware store. So this is the piece I chose, but what did I look for on this piece? I needed to find a piece that didn't need a whole lot of repairs. It needed to be in good condition. And this just needed some fill for some scratches and then some uneven spots of missing veneer. So I was able to just fill it. I'll be able to give this a sanding, a clear coat of shellac for primer, and this one will be ready to paint. But because I don't have my power tools, I needed to make sure that it didn't need a whole lot of repairs. I went ahead and set my search to my local area that I'm staying in, and I was able to find this on my local Facebook Marketplace for $35. So I'm going to be refinishing a piece of furniture away from my usual workspace. I'm on vacation and I'm going to be doing this at the house that we're staying at. So this would be similar to when you're traveling and wanting to refinish a piece at an Airbnb, what's available locally that you can pick up at your hardware store and get started. So the only things I brought when I traveled with me are this milk paint from Fusion, and this was nice to travel with because it comes in resealable pouches, and I can mix this into the paint into a paint using water from anywhere that I am. So I traveled with my pouches of milk paint. I traveled with some brushes from Fusion and then my mister bottle in case I needed it. So those were the only things that came with me from home. But what did I pick up at the hardware store? Well, I grabbed some stir sticks for my paint because I'm going to need to mix that with some water. I grabbed a small thing of wood putty. This is just to fill the unevenness in the piece that I got. I got a car washing sponge. I'm going to use this to apply my clear coat. This could also be used to apply wax. I got some double-sided tape. I'm going to use this to apply some gift wrap that I bought to paper inside the drawers. I have this bowl scraper, which is a silicone tool, and I can use this either for some scraping on a paint technique. I got it actually because I was thinking I would use it for applying my wood putty, but I ended up not using it for that, so we'll see if I end up using this. Of course, a screwdriver for removing my hardware and then putting it back on. I got a box cutter. I'm going to use the razor blades for cutting my paper for my inside of my drawers. I use this to apply my wood putty. I got some spray paint with a built-in primer, and I'm going to use this to change the color of all my hardware. I got some lint-free rags. I got a wax brush because I only brought paint brushes, but I didn't have a wax brush, and I do like to apply wax with a brush. Applying it with a rag is another option. I got two choices. I got polycrylic, and this is the minwax polycrylic in a clear matte finish. And I can use this as my finish over my paint, but I could also use this to apply the paper to my drawers if I wanted to make it permanent. I'm not sure on that yet. I got some sanding sponges. The sponge that I got is a 120. This is a nice medium grit. It's probably one of my most used. And then I just got this combo pack of papers. These are half sheets, and I can wrap each one around my sanding sponge and get any grit that I need. And then I got my minwax paste finishing wax. I love this stuff. It's a nice durable wax. I can use this to seal my milk paint, but I can also use this to seal my glides, make sure those glide easier inside the frame, seal my drawer boxes, anything like that. So I'm not sure whether I'll use the paste wax or the polycrylic to seal my paint, but I do have those options. So this is everything I picked up. This should be everything I need to refinish my piece. The only repair this dresser really needed was to fill some spots where the veneer had slightly chipped. It wasn't loose or anything, so I was able to just take a little bit of my wood putty. I used a razor blade and scraped it into the areas. Okay, I'm going to mix up my first batch of my milk paint. So I've got just some paper cups that I'm going to mix it in. I have some warm water. The warm water is supposed to help dissolve the paint. I'm going to open the pouches, just a tear top. And I'm going to go ahead and mix the entirety of this color. Although I could mix a smaller batch, and this Ziploc top will help preserve it. But I think I'm going to be using all of this one. So it's a mixture of 1 part paint to 1 part water. So once I've got all my powder in there, that's what that looks like. And I'm going to pour some water in. I'm going to go ahead and stir this up using a stir stick. And then you want to let this sit. And that's so all the particles of the paint can dissolve into the water. So I'm going to stir this up really well, and then as it sits, those bubbles that come on top are going to start to dissolve. I'll make sure I come back and stir it again after it's had a few minutes to dissolve. So I'm going to go ahead and probably mix up a few colors. And I can feel it dissolving even just as I stir it right now. While my milk mixture is setting up, I'm going to go ahead and take a sanding sponge, and I'm just going to lightly sand some of these areas that I added my wood filler to, just to get them nice and even with the surface. Nice and smooth. And then I'm going to go ahead and just scuff up my piece overall, just to give some tooth to this existing finish for all the finishes that I plan to put over top. All right, next I cleaned my piece with using a little bit of Dawn dish soap, which is a regular household cleaner. And now I'm going over it with an alcohol wipe just to remove any residue using the alcohol. Once my surface is nice and clean, I'm going to go ahead and spray this down with 2 coats of a spray shellac. And this is going to block in all the oils from the wood and keep those from seeping through my milk paint. Also refinish the sides of these drawers. They're pretty stained, and I don't have my sander to sand them down with, so I'm going to go ahead and paint them. So the first thing I'm going to do is give them a light sanding, and then I'm going to clean these, and I'm also going to seal them with a coat of shellac before my paint. With my prep done, all of my paint has dissolved nicely into the water, and I'm ready to go ahead and start laying a coat on. So I went ahead and mixed the color Wisteria and Terrarium to create this sort of medium blue color. I'm using this soft blue as an undercoat for my paint. It's going to unify the wood color and make it slightly lighter, and then it's going to peek through my paint finish in a couple places. While my paint coat is drying, I'm going to spray my hardware. I sanded these lightly, and I'm applying a coat of black paint with a primer built in. Since I don't have most of the tools in my workspace, I wanted to add a little bit of interest to this paint finish. So what's something I can do? Stripes. They're really simple. I was able to just pick up a little bit of painter's tape. I did have to run back to the store for that. So I grabbed some wide painter's tape and taped off some stripes just across my top drawer. My final paint finish is actually going to be in shades of white and gray. I'm using the colors London Fog, Gotham Gray, and Silver Screen from Fusion Milk Paint. I chose these 3 colors because I figured they'll be nice and neutral. I'm actually refinishing this piece for my husband's boss. The house that we're staying at actually belongs to his manager and coworker that he's worked with for about 15 years. So it's a good friend of ours who let us stay at her home, and I want this to be a gift and a housewarming gift for her home. I hadn't seen her home before we left, so I figured that some shades of gray would be nice and neutral and match with her decor, and I actually got really lucky because it really does. And then I had chosen the blue as the accent color because I love blues, and that happened to tie in with her decor really well too. So that'll be my stripes peeking through will be in the blue with the shades of the white and the gray over top. The light color of the milk paint gets really light coverage. It is going to take me 2 coats to get coverage on this piece, but that's okay. That can usually be expected anytime you're using whites. So I'm using a brush for each color, and I started out with a stripe in my lightest color down the center, and then it's going to gradually get darker as it gets out to the edges in that Gotham gray. I'm using really random brush strokes, so even though this is a soft kind of blended look, I'm making sure that my brush strokes go in kind of random directions, and that's because in the final finish I envision that I'm going to use a dark wax, and I wanted to really pick up on all those brush strokes. I just continued to work my way around the piece, and by the time I got back to my original side, I felt like it was ready for a second coat, so I went ahead and put one on, and I wasn't overworking the paint, so I didn't have any issues with it pulling that paint coat underneath. You can see how with the blue peeking through underneath and the irregular brush strokes, the paint starts to take on this really cool aged finish. So now it's time for the magic, and let's peel off the tape for our stripes. You can see my blue peeking through underneath, and the tape pulled some of my paint. You guys, I loved the chippy finish that it gave just by pulling that tape off. In fact, I loved the look of pulling the tape off so much that I decided to repeat it on the entirety of the body of my piece. So I just took some pieces of my painter's tape and I went through and I stuck them on my piece and I pulled them off. So ladies, this reminds you of getting a good waxing, right? This might be painful to watch. Where are my estheticians at? What the tape did is it picked up on any spots that the paint wasn't as well attached, and it went ahead and pulled those off. So this was in areas where maybe my paint had gotten a little bit crackled, and it pulled away some of that crackling finish. And I just tried to keep it really irregular. Some spots looked like they had more wear and some spots looked like they had less. It was very authentic in the end though. An alternative to this, I often see people using a paint scraper to get off pieces of chippy paint, but the tape worked great for me and was actually something that I had available. The drawer boxes on these were kind of sad looking, and so I went ahead and decided to paint them. I just gave them a kind of uneven coat of the silver screen, and then I waxed them using my clear wax. Next, I'm going to fit my drawers for some papers on the interior. So this is just an inexpensive gift wrap that I picked up at the local Target store where I'm staying. I went ahead and fit it to size by placing it in my drawer and then pressing it into the corners with my fingers. I trimmed off the excess using a pair of scissors, and now I'm going to apply some double-sided tape to the back of my paper, and this is what's going to stick it to the bottom. This paper is not going to be permanent, so if they ever want to change it out, they can. The other alternative to this would be laying the paper in using polycrylic and making it permanent with decoupage, but I like the idea of changing it out with the tape. Okay, so I bought some clear wax to go with my finish here, but I'm missing dark wax and I really want to kind of age this piece even a little bit more. So I'm going to try something I haven't done before, and I'm thinking tea stained, but I'm going to use coffee, and we're going to coffee stain my wax. So I put a little bit of my clear wax into this cup, and I'm going to put some coffee grounds in here. And even if it's a little textured, that's okay, because when I buff it, the texture will come out. But this is coloring my wax to a dark color. So I'm going to take a little bit of my and you can see it does create some dark on my surface. And then I'm going to buff this away, and I want this darker color to stay in some of the cracks and the crevices that my milk paint is creating. So I'm experimenting with making my own dark wax. I don't even have any wood stain. Wood stain is an even better option, but I don't have that. So I'm using what I have. Cinnamon might work, but I didn't have any cinnamon either. I actually liked the look that the coffee was given, and I wanted some more dark areas, so I went ahead and dumped a little bit more of my grounds and I ground them into the wax. Okay, so now that we're done with this piece, I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about what I would have changed if I was in my workspace and I had access to things that I really wanted. So what did I really miss having? Number one, I really wish I had some kind of a stencil. I would have loved to stencil the drawer sides on this one. I looked for stencils. We even found a Joann's and they didn't have a single stencil. They told me that I needed to drive about an hour and a half away to the local Hobby Lobby, and that was out of the question. So I wish I had some stencils. I would have stenciled the drawer sides on this one to make it a little more fun to tie in with that pretty paper that I put inside the drawers. What else did I wish I had? I really missed my rolling stool. I didn't think I would miss that so much, but I missed it when I was taking photos, and I missed it when I was working around the piece painting my rolling stool. And I really missed black wax, you guys. I was craving it. I wanted to add a little bit of black wax just on some of the corners here, maybe in the crevices up the sides. So I was really missing my black wax. A little bit of gilding wax. I think I could have brought out these little keyholes. I ended up using a little tiny bit of spray paint on them, but I missed gilding wax. So those are just a few things that I didn't realize how much I used them and how much I would miss them. Okay, we are all done with this piece. Let's talk a little bit about how I staged it. So I chose this metal tile, which is kind of a decrepit metal, but it's got the blues in it that ties in with my striping. I've got some baskets for texture on the top, and I also tied in the blue with some blue fabric in there. Some springtime decor because it is spring. And then I flanked it on either side with a chair and the basket. So I've got my set of threes going on with 3 different heights. 1, 2, 3. And then up top, I'm also working with 3 heights. I've got 1, 2, 3. So everything sort of balances out in this little vignette that I created. This was the clearest wall in the space that I'm staying in that I chose to stage on this wall. And I think it's cute. It looks a little bit farmhouse. It's got a lot of interest and texture and a little bit of springtime decor. So this piece is done. What do you guys think? How did you guys enjoy refinishing on the go and working from a place other than my workspace? I really enjoyed working with milk paint for the first time. It's so authentic. This piece looks extremely vintage. If you guys enjoyed this video, you can find more Brushed by Brandy on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, and on my website at brushedbybrandy.com. And there's links for everything we use in the description for this post.